Okay, welcome. We are with Lon Safko, and we are going to be talking about innovation. I have a poll set up for you right now. If you are interested in finding, we've got this poll going. Which one are you? Inventor, entrepreneur, or innovator? So feel free to take that poll. We are happy to talk about social media, mobile marketing, and I'm going to kick us off with a little story here about how live webinars, how this webinar is going to kind of transform the marketplace. We were just talking a minute ago, Lon and I, about how advertising is important. And I'm going to, before we get into sharing what Lon's talking about, I'm going to share my screen with you and talk a little bit about National University and how marketing skills are really important. So you should be able to see this. And I'm going to fill the screen there. Talk about the skills needed in today's business world, and they really are about marketing. So if you want to find out a little bit more about the program I'm going to share, this is what some of our students look like. And this is Zoom. We are teaching mobile marketing and social media, and they're all over the world. They're learning about these skills, they're learning about best practices, and they're able to apply them that very day, that very next day, and from then on. So they can learn, apply, and get a degree all at the same time. So I have wonderful stories to tell. For example, Joe Burrows down in the bottom right-hand corner. He had never taken an online class before. He became one of the social experts in our class. He's a veteran. Now he's hoping to raise $1 million for nonprofits, and he's using it through the social media tools that he learned in the program at National University. So what we have is real-world courses taught by real business people. You get a degree, a specialization, and you've got a plan. You've got 2 mobile marketing classes, a social media 2 courses, and then the final course is where you create your own plan. And you don't need a GMAT to begin this. You can get started in March. So we've got a program of 5 courses, March, April, May, June, and July. And this summer, you'll be launched. In social media, we're teaching all of these platforms. In mobile marketing, we've got some content that looks like this, where you actually learn how to pair up the job roles with the positions. It's kind of a fun game. We gamify learning, and just an example of how we do that. So back to where we started with Lon Safko. We're talking about mobile marketing, social media, and today our focus is going to be on innovation. So I'd like to first welcome Lon with a short introduction, if I may. And he's got so many accomplishments behind him. I do have a list. I'm going to have to note that this is only a partial list, but he did star in a PBS TV special called Social Media and You, Communicating in a Digital World. He invented the first computer to save a human life, and 18 inventions. He's also spent most of his career as an entrepreneur, innovator, president, and CEO, and that's over 4 decades. He started 14 startups. He invented the first voice recognition and first home automation for the disabled, and invented the first 3-dimensional virtual environment. He also invented things like tooltips, which were used by Microsoft's Bob operating system, which I hadn't heard of. He's got patents, software copyrights. He's received honors and awards worldwide, and we are so grateful that Lon has decided to join us today. And this is a chance for us to communicate, learn, and just experience what Lon's got. So Lon, please say hi. And did I miss anything important?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm a best-selling author too. Social Media Bible, Fusion Marketing Bible, and now a new book, the Innovative Thinking Bible.
Excellent. Thanks for those, because I do have copies of all of those books, and I have read them all. So I appreciate that you have. And I've read the Innovative Bible, Innovative Thinking Bible, just again. And so even though it's just now out, I really feel the urge to invent as I read this book. So it's on Amazon. You can read my review there, and the Social Media Bible and the Fusion Marketing Bible. We'll talk a little bit about those. Let's start off and talk a little bit about creativity, if we can. Okay, so in your book on innovation, you give an example of riding a bike with your 8-year-old daughter and how you realized her perspective was different. Okay, so let's talk for a brief minute about your perspective in being creative and some of the obstacles that we may face.
That's great. You really did read the book, because I've never told that story outside of the book. So thank you for that. Yeah, and just so the people watching understand, yeah, when my daughter was 8 years old, we would go hiking in the Arizona desert. We lived in Phoenix for about 20 years. And she was about 8 years old, and we would go on this simple hike out to the petroglyphs. And we'd only be 20 minutes into the hike, and she'd say, "Daddy, where is it? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" Typical, you always hear that coming from the back seat, "Are we there yet?" And this went on for half an hour. And then I kept telling her, "It's right there. Can't you see where the two mountains come together?" And she goes, "No, I can't see that rock that you're talking about." So we'd walk a little bit more, and she'd ask again, and then I'd tell her, "It's where the two mountains come together. You can't see it." And I was getting really frustrated because she couldn't understand, but it was a mountain and a rock the size of a school bus. So I finally got down on one knee and I said, "Can't you?" And then I looked, and I noticed that the trail had gone up just high enough that from her perspective, she could not possibly see what I was talking about that whole time. So there was this revelation that happened to me that your perspective changes. When I was a teenager, my parents told me what to do and what not to do, but I didn't have the context to put it in. When I became an entrepreneur, I heard the words about business plans and plan your work and work your plan and all that, but it had no context. It didn't have any value. So as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, as an inventor, what I realized was as we go through life and we gain more and more and more experiences, our context around all of the questions that we have to solve changes. It becomes more broader, and we have more experiences to draw from. And it's just physically and mentally impossible to teach a teenager not to do drugs. They don't get it. So that's what happens to us. We have to expand our horizons so that our creativity and innovation can expand with them.
Wow, that's a great story. So we are all facing obstacles, but we are all able to try to create the solutions to those obstacles. So talking about creativity and back to, we're going to talk about innovation a little bit further on. We've got some people in the room here, and we'll be happy to take questions from them. If they type them in the chat, we'll get to them all. But I want to talk about kind of back to social media, where you and I crossed paths 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, at National University. We learned about social media through your books. We learned about fusion marketing through your books. Why is creativity important for social media?
Creativity is particularly important. I teach top executives around the world. That's what I've done since we've met. I mean, Kuala Lumpur and Singapore and Shanghai and Mumbai and Delhi and Zurich. And the one thing that I teach them is I can teach you all the social media tools. I can show you how to use LinkedIn, and I can teach you Facebook, I teach you Twitter, I can Instagram. But the thing is that everybody else knows those same tools, and they have access to the same tools. So what is going to differentiate your company? What's going to make your company more competitive? What's going to make it more successful? There's only one thing, and that's creativity. And if you look at all the different social media campaigns, I mean, going back a couple of years when the electricity went out during the football game. What is the big end football game called?
Super Bowl.
Super Bowl, thank you. You can tell I'm a real sports fanatic. Yeah, went out during the Super Bowl. Somebody over at Oreo says on Twitter, "The lights are out, but you can still dunk in the dark." Ah, nailed it. That was one of the best campaigns of the year because they were paying attention and they were creative and they were playful. And that's what's going to differentiate you and every other company in the world.
And you and I talked about this last week, one-on-one, when the CES show lost power. And somebody from Oreo tweeted, "That's right, you can still dunk in the dark." And how on top of it were they? And the irony was that this was the world's greatest inventions. They had a 200,000 person audience from every country in the world. And because they lost their electricity, it went dark and they had to kick everybody out of the convention center.
Amazing.
But still, people were able to tweet. So that was a real bonus for Twitter and all of those who were creative enough to jump on that bandwagon. They got a lot of play. Right?
Very creative. And they deserve it because they were creative. They were more creative than anybody else out of those 200,000 people. And we're talking about it, which means they've differentiated themselves enough that they're at the top of the stack. And that's what being creative is about. That's why it's useful. And it doesn't matter if it's just marketing or if you're only an entrepreneur, if you want to solve a problem. You need to be creative and innovative throughout your entire life, no matter what you do. Because you always, like you said earlier, you're always solving one type of a problem or another.
So it's not just about what you say. It's about how you say it and when you say it and who you say it to. There's so many elements to that creativity. That's about the strategy. This is really what gets me excited. And you too?
Yeah, it does. It really does. It is about the strategy. And the funny thing is most people don't think that they're creative. A poll was taken recently, and they polled a bunch of kids in 2nd and 3rd grade, and they said, raise your hand, how many people think that they're creative? 95% of the kids raised their hands because they are creative. I mean, they're drawing and they're arts and crafting. And then they took a bunch of high school kids, and they asked the same question, and less than 5% actually raised their hand. And I was like, okay, so what happened between grade school and high school? And that's what I've been studying the last 20 years, is to find out where did we go wrong. And what it comes down to is allowing yourself to be playful, allowing yourself to do something completely different than anybody else and not feeling intimidated.
So in your book, you talk about 3 things as far as definitions: an inventor, an innovator, and an entrepreneur. And we're going to have a little poll here. So an inventor creates something new, exciting, never seen before. An entrepreneur builds a company around something new and exciting. And an innovator, which is what your book's about, creates something new, exciting, never before seen, builds a company around it, and makes money at it. Okay? So here's our poll. You in the audience, please complete this poll if you can. We've got a few of you already taking it. So, Lon, do you want to comment on the difference between the inventor, the entrepreneur, and an innovator in case someone's not sure what they are?
Yeah, absolutely. And you, by the way, you could be 2 or you could be all 3. In my case, I'm all 3. I've done all 3 of them. But let's take a look at just a pure inventor. Did you know that Abraham Lincoln is the only U.S. president ever to receive a U.S. patent? He was going down the Mississippi on a riverboat and saw all the other riverboats stuck on the sandbars. And he thought, well, I could solve that. And he invented these balloons that you pump up using the steam engine that was already in the boat. And as the balloons on the side of the boat pumped up, the boat would raise itself off the sandbar. And he got a patent on that. But of course, he never did anything with it. He didn't build a company. He didn't sell the rights. He just had the patent. That's an inventor. That's awesome. Now, an innovator, an entrepreneur, that's Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was amazing at building companies and using other people's ideas. Now, he never actually invented the MP3 player. That was done decades before. I had a Philips MP3 player 5 years before he ever invented the iPod. What Steve could do is he could take an idea and he could make it sexy and he could make you believe that you had to have that. Oh my gosh, that's an entrepreneur. And he did that his whole life. Wozniak created the Apple II, not Jobs. So Wozniak was the inventor. Jobs was the entrepreneur. Now, a true person, Thomas Edison, let's say, for example, he invented the light bulb. No kidding, okay. And he created a business around it, and he became profitable. I mean, Edison Electric, and eventually became General Electric, and he had 1,194 patents to his name. So he knew how to take it from cradle to grave, from the very concept to actually being a successful, profitable idea. That's the difference between the 3. And it's okay to be any one of those.
So to summarize, we've got Abraham Lincoln, who's the inventor, Steve Jobs, the entrepreneur, and Thomas Edison as the innovator.
I agree, yes.
And you're all 3.
I'm all 3 because that's what I've done. I've come up with ideas that nobody's ever seen before. I've turned them into viable products. I've built companies around them, and I've turned them into successful companies. Even like that silly paper model company, we're approaching 50,000 customers and generated over $1 million in revenue just by selling paper models online. I mean, how ridiculous is that?
Okay,
But
so
it's that process.
you've invented many things. It's not ridiculous. You've written about them in your book. What was the most important invention so far? Was it tool tips that became Microsoft's operating system, or another one of your breakthroughs?
Well, the funny thing is it depends on how you look at it. The tooltips was something that I invented for the physically disabled. Tooltips is when you move your cursor over a button and a little window pops up and it tells you what that button does, and then you move it over another button. And that's in every operating system. And I did that because physically disabled quadriplegics can't hold a manual. They couldn't pick up a book and learn how to actually run the computer. So I had to figure out a way where they could just simply move their head, because they were using a head mouse, and learn how to use the computer. Well, eventually Apple took that from me because I had a relationship with Apple. I was a value-added reseller. And then when Microsoft stole the operating system from Apple, and Apple sued them in 1995, well, they stole the tooltip idea that Apple had already taken from me, and it became part of the Microsoft operating system, and now it's in every operating system in the world. But I invented that March 6, 1987. So that, as far as scale, is a big deal. Nobody knows that it's mine, but everybody in the world knows what it is. As far as rewarding to me, saving people's lives. I just got emotional rush just for this second, thinking back on the people that I've worked with. People that were completely paralyzed from their neck down, wanting to commit suicide, but couldn't because they couldn't move. And building a system where they can dial the phone. And I had one woman without arms typing 44 words a minute, and she wrote a book. And people going back to work after being paralyzed from the neck down. And the last person I got to work with personally was Christopher Reeve. I got to work with Superman. And these are experiences that no money, no fame or fortune or anything could ever replace. So by far, that was the most powerful for me.
Well, one of the quotes really struck me from your book. I'd like you to make a comment on that. It says, "You can never go wrong doing the right thing." Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, being in the computer industry, as long as I did, I watched Steve Jobs. And of course, nobody wants to know about the bad side of Steve Jobs, but there was a very, very bad side to Steve Jobs. And if anybody wants to discuss it offline, I'm happy to share some of the stories that I experienced firsthand. He didn't always do the right thing, and he was successful. And I could also tell you about Bill Gates. I spent an afternoon with Bill Gates' dad one day talking about the secrets behind the Gates empire. So he didn't always do the right thing either. So it was a tough decision I was going to write a book, Walking Among Giants, because I was constantly getting stepped on by Microsoft, IBM, Apple. I was literally, my nose was bleeding. So, but what I realized is that I had the opportunity not to do the right thing, but to do something that maybe was a little less ethical and profit by it. I mean, I would be very, very rich if I would have made certain decisions differently. But I made a decision long ago, 40 years ago. I'm always going to try to do the right thing, because in the long run, that's what's going to pay off best. And I don't regret that at all. So that was just an integrity decision that I had to make. But I'll pass that on to whoever eventually is going to be faced with that same question. Do the right thing, because it will always work out in the long run.
Okay, that's a really good answer. Thank you so much. I have one other quote that I want you to talk about here. "Admitting your weaknesses is your strongest strength." Please elaborate on this.
You did read it. Thank you so much for paying such close attention. Yeah, in the book, any of these little insights that I've come across in my life, I've kind of just always jotted down. And when I wrote the book, I put like 40 of them in there. And yeah, admitting your weakness is actually your strongest strength. And that's absolutely true, because when I became an entrepreneur, first of all, I have an engineering background. I was a civil engineer, and I owned a civil engineering company. So what does that prepare me for? I got a sidebar here just for a second. Marketing. You got to go to National University and get a degree in marketing, or at least take those classes, because I had no marketing whatsoever when I came out of college as an engineer. So I started an engineering company, and I sat there waiting for the phone to ring, and I had no idea why it wouldn't ring, because I didn't know anything about marketing. And then I find myself a computer technician, and then an inventor, and then a CEO, and then an author. Throughout my entire life, if I didn't learn marketing, I would never have been able to succeed. So it doesn't matter, even if you don't want to be a marketing person, you got to market yourself, even just to get your next job. Okay, enough with that
Thanks for the sidebar and the plug. Shout out. I am the program director for marketing at National University, in case anybody wants to reach me. And we do have classes starting in March
And that was
in mobile marketing and social media. So just what this is all about.
And that was not a paid political comment. That was from my heart. And I don't even remember what
Admitting your weaknesses is your strongest strength.
That was one of my first major weaknesses. So as an entrepreneur, I always try to be introspective. So I had this unbelievable computer that could save people's lives, but I didn't know what to do with it. I had the same problem that I had with my civil engineering. So I admitted, and I went and I sought out people who were experts at marketing all around the country. And that was before the internet, by the way, which made it very, very difficult. And I teamed up with them. And I said, help me do this. And I didn't have any money, so I'd give them stock or whatever was necessary. And then as my company grew, I realized I couldn't be the CEO and the vice president of sales. I was good at being a CEO and an inventor, but I wasn't the best at sales. So I went and I found the best person I could at sales. So throughout my life, it's always been a series of identifying my weaknesses so that I can surround myself with people who that represents their strengths. Because as a team, a smaller piece of a really big pie is so much better than the whole pie if it doesn't exist. So that's really important. Identify your weaknesses. Don't be ashamed of them. You're good at what you do. Otherwise, you wouldn't be looking for people to work with you. Embrace that, but embrace your weaknesses and surround yourself with people that have those as strengths.
Well, that's such good advice for me and for everyone here. And I also wanted to show this little big dream, okay? So dream big. This is kind of my little thought for the day. I want to also talk about overcoming barriers. So we know what our strengths are. How do we overcome? And you mentioned this in the book, in the chapter called Inattentional Blindness. So you talk about environmental, emotional, and cultural. Those are the three barriers. Why'd you focus a whole chapter in a book on innovation, talking about the obstacles?
Like I said a little bit earlier, like we discussed, when we polled the grade school kids, they were all creative. They were all innovative. When we polled high school kids, they weren't. Something happened in between there. So what I wanted to do is find out why, because if I could identify what happened between those two age groups, then I could possibly eliminate the different barriers and allow adults to be as creative as grade schoolers. And once we do that, we're going to become innovative. We're going to become creative. And what I found is that we have to blame our parents. Yeah, that's another one for your psychology, your weekly sessions. Blame your parents, but you can also blame your teachers and your nuns and your rabbis and your police officers and everybody who tried to raise us. The thing is that as children, we were always raised to be conformed. Stand in line, don't talk, look like the other kids, dress like the other kids, do the homework, because A, it was easier for the teachers and the administrators, the parents, to maintain a herd of children. But also they believed that the more we conformed, the happier we would be, because the easier it would be for us to get a job and fit into society and all that other stuff. Problem was, as a kid, I never fit in. I'm the only kid that I know to this date that got kicked out of Catholic school. 3rd grade, they just simply asked me not to come back because I questioned everything. So that was the turning point for me. But the rest of us conform. And that's what I've always tried to teach my kids is question everything. Don't conform. Look at things completely different. And then being playful is the other thing that's really important. Don't be embarrassed. There's no such thing as being childish. You know, you can do silly things. My grandkids call me Papa Monkey Head because everything I do is fun. Every way I teach them is something completely different. And if I just want to have a game of tag in the house and knock over the lamps, that's what I do. And they love it because that way they can see that you don't have to conform to be successful.
Well, that's really good advice for those here listening. And I'd love to take any questions that you have also. So please go ahead and ask a question. You've got Lon right here ready to answer. He's happy to take your questions.
And if you're watching this on demand, send us emails. I'm happy to answer via email.
Okay, so I want to talk about left and right brains. Okay, so can you help us identify if we are left brain or right brain or a combination?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, of course, everything I'm about to say on this subject is a gross generalization. It doesn't apply to everyone, and there's crossover. For example, I'm very left and very right brain. I'm both. I'm probably a little more right, but definitely a combination of both. The left side of your brain processes analytical information. It remembers your phone number. It remembers the directions on how to get to work. It helps you walk down a flight of stairs without breaking your neck. It adds up numbers in your head, calculates tips, and keeps you basically safe. It's running full time. As long as you're awake, it's keeping you safe and maneuvering you through life. The right side of your brain is concepts and colors and images and fun stuff. It basically, right now you're operating on the left side of your brain because we're thinking and we're talking and communicating. When you go to sleep tonight and you start having dreams, it's your right brain kind of running rampant. It's having fun. It's putting stuff together, mostly stuff that you've learned in the previous day. It's reinforcing these memories. But it's also random. So here's the deal. If the creativity mostly comes from the right brain. Now, keep in mind, creativity, when you're actually in the process of creating, your entire brain lights up. They've done it in MRIs, and so the whole brain lights up like a jazz musician. Musician is an example. When he was composing a piece in an fMRI, his whole brain lit up. But it really mostly comes from the right side, the creative side. So the right side of your brain comes up with these great ideas, but it has to communicate it to the left side so that you can realize it. It can come to your conscious. And that's where we have the problem. We have all of these great ideas, but we don't allow this communication between the left and the right sides of our brain so that these great ideas eventually are just going to dry up and die. But if we can practice, the left brain will then start listening and realizing, and then we can consciously roll those ideas out and make them real. But it's about being both.
Wow, this as you're saying this, I'm thinking about the right side of our brain being the operating system, the computer that's working, but you need to have a password to tell the left side of the brain where to open the folder or the file.
Absolutely perfect. And somebody banging on the keyboard is the left side of the brain. So you get the CPU doing all the magic behind, creating the images and doing all that great stuff. And then you got somebody banging away on the keyboard on the left side, but the password is never allowed. But I did come up with those 3 C's that are in the book that kind of help with that.
Bingo, bingo. Well, let's answer a question here from Sherry. Thank you for asking. It says, how long did it take you to compile all the resources you shared in the Social Media Bible? And what are your thoughts on social media innovations? Thanks for your questions.
Yeah, that's a great question. That was a monumental task. And I'll be honest, if I would have known how big a job that was going to be, I probably wouldn't have signed the contract with John Wiley & Sons, because I didn't realize at the time that I had to write a book that included everything. Everything from email to of course, all the social platforms, but video sharing, audio sharing, virtual reality, basically every form of digital communication. So I had actually thought about it while I was pitching Blue Sky, it's called, to all the different publishers. I had already been published at Pearson Educational about home building, but I really wanted to get into marketing and I wanted to get more into digital. So I've been thinking about it for about 1.5 years. The toughest actual part of it was to take literally 1,000 different types of platforms and create categories, actually put them into 21 separate categories that made sense, like video sharing or audio sharing or podcasting, artificial reality, email, whatever. That was really tough. And then to identify all of the companies and all of the different platforms that were represented in each of those spaces. And then the last part was, and this is the toughest part, is I identified 50 of the top people in the world that were actually working on each of these individual platforms. And I interviewed them because I knew that I wasn't an expert at everything. Recognizing my weaknesses again. So for example, I contacted Biz Stone, who invented Twitter. And I spent an hour on the phone with him asking him, why did he invent it? How are companies using it? And those all of the audios, if you played them back to back, it was 24 hours of audio files, and you can find those on the Social Media Bible. They're free. And Matt Mullingweg, I wanted to know more about why he invented WordPress. So I spent an hour on the phone with Matt Mullingweg, and it was like 50 of them. And Vint Cerf was my favorite. You know Vint. You got a chance to work with him. He invented the internet. Imagine talking to the guy who invented the internet, asking him what he thought about social media and where he thought social media was going to take the internet in 10 years. That's the kind of information that I wanted in the book, not just myopic perspective. So
well, Sherry's commented that she listened to those.
Oh,
So now share a little bit about the social media innovations. I think she's referring to now. What are you seeing out there?
Oh, yeah. Well, of course, you can't answer that question without talking about what happened Friday or Thursday afternoon. You and I had a little bit of a chance through email to kind of discuss it. Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg put Facebook on its ear. From what I can see, not as a marketer, but as a user of Facebook, it's probably going to be a good idea. Even though he has over 2 billion users, what's happening is most of the active users are the new users, and the ones that have been out there for a while are kind of getting bored and overwhelmed because we're just getting too much garbage. Or as he called it, Zuckerberg called it junk food. We get too much junk food thrown at us. And in the form of sponsored posts, publishers' posts, and just people that are just posting nonsense. So we're all kind of sick of that. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to tighten it up, of course, to if you don't engage with a post, then you're not going to be served a post from that person or that company again. So if there's somebody that you like, you got to engage. You got to get in there and comment on it if you want to see posts from that person again, which could be good. But now let's get back to us as marketers. I don't know what to say. I mean, one of the toughest things right now is trying to put together a marketing plan. It is difficult. Google AdWords, prohibitively expensive, and the click-through rate is terrible. Conversion is terrible. Facebook ads, moderate, not great. Even the best people in the world are getting moderate results. Something like what happened Thursday, Friday is going to absolutely kill us. Because why would anybody interact and comment on a sponsored ad? It doesn't even make any sense. So they're going to allow us to keep our pages, but we're not going to get any reach at all. And the reach we were getting was really bad. And of the reach, the conversion was even worse. So what are we going to do? Twitter? There's no conversion on Twitter. It's really terrible. The other thing is that there's this shift in the younger audience, not just millennials, but they're shifting to mostly to Instagram.
Messaging.
Yeah, messaging. It's all text messaging, but not Twitter. I was with my grandkids over the holidays, and they're in their late teens, one's in college, and I said, well, why don't you connect with me on Facebook, and I'll give you a copy of the book. Because, no, that's only for old people. So now we got that problem. We're seeing this age division really separating all of the different marketing tools out there. So when a client comes to me now, it's like, you know what, we got to sit down. If you've never heard of the term A/B testing, you're gonna really understand it now.
So for those who don't know what that term means, just please briefly describe what that is.
Yeah, A/B testing is something that we all should do always, everywhere. And let's take Facebook advertising, for example. You can't just put an ad out there with a photograph and certain copy and expect people to react to it. Some may, but you don't know if they're not reacting because they don't like your product, or maybe it was the image, or maybe it was the words that you used in the copy. So what I always recommend is that if you're going to do like a Facebook ad, you do at least 5. Give me 5 different images and give me 5 different copy. Move the words around, use different adjectives, whatever. But make them different. Mix them up a little bit. Then let's push all 5 of them out there, and then we can measure which ones are doing the best. This goes back almost 20 years to email marketing, where I first really embraced A/B testing. I would do a different subject line, and I would send out 5 emails and see which subject line actually responded the best. And it's staggering. You can have the exact same email with 5 different subject lines, and one will do 80% better than any of the other ones. And to this day, I, for the most part, don't know why. But I stick with what works.
That's a marketing research term. So I'm sure there's going to be many people that are doing more A/B testing in the future. And yes, I agree with you. The pages are going away. The groups, however, that could be an opportunity. So if you have a group, or if you're thinking about starting a group, this would be a good time to focus on those, because that's what Facebook is looking for. And as far as messaging goes, if you're not already doing messaging, there's many good messaging channels. So start your focus on the AI world. That's where everybody's going with messaging. So we have a question here from Wayne. He wants to know, what are the top things we can do to become more innovative? Thanks, Wayne, for your question.
Yeah, thank you, Wayne. Top things that we can do to be more innovative. Okay, can I mention the 3 C's real quick?
Please.
Okay, so in the book, what it comes to is, okay, so what do I do? How do I become more innovative? And there's something that's called the 3 C's. Now, there's other psychologists, and even John Cleese from Monty Python for the last 20 years, believe it or not, you know what he's done? He's talked about innovation and creativity, because everybody was always asking him how he was so creative coming up with those skits as rapidly as he did. And what it comes down to is this, and these are my own terms, but it kind of agrees with all the psychologists. It's collect, calculate, and communicate. And it gets back to what we were saying earlier. If you want to be more creative, you got to focus on the problem. You got to collect information. That's the first C. Collecting information means you got to brainstorm, you got to mind map, you got to SWOT analysis, whatever it takes to fill out and to fill in all the voids and the gaps in truly understanding what you're trying to solve. Also, by the way, being innovative isn't just solving problems. Most of my best innovations, I wasn't trying to solve a problem. I was just trying to come up with cool stuff. So it could be done either way. And you collect as much information as you can on that subject. Here's an important thing. Don't look in your industry. If you were trying to solve a problem and you turn to your industry, you're wasting your time. If they knew the answer, you would have already known it. And the example I gave was Henry Ford was trying to solve the problem of building individual cars. He had 30 engineers working on one car for an entire month, and he couldn't afford to sell those cars. He wanted to figure out some way to reduce the price. So he out of frustration, he goes out to a potato farm in Michigan, and he's watching the potatoes going up the conveyor belt, dropping into the truck, and he says, wow, if I took the potato off and I put a car on there and it went past the engineers, so he invented the assembly line. Well, he didn't actually invent the assembly line, but he was the first one to bring it into the auto industry. And of course, he became the most successful car manufacturers of the 20s and 30s. That was a big deal. He didn't find the solution in the auto industry. The Oldsmobile brothers didn't know about it. Chevy didn't know about it. Mercedes-Benz didn't know about it. Okay, so collect as much information outside of your industry as possible. Then you got to give it some time, and that's the frustrating part. You got to keep thinking about it, keep collecting. Your brain, remember your right brain, when you're dreaming, it will start putting these puzzle pieces together and looking for the missing puzzle pieces. Then the last part of it is communicate. And that's what we talked about, right and left brain. Allow your right brain to communicate with your left brain. We all come up with great ideas. And where do we come up with them? In the shower, when we're exercising, when we're jogging, in the car. These are all places where your left brain says, okay, I'm in the shower, probably not going to get hit by a bus, not going to get eaten by a lion, not going to fall down the stairs, I'm going to take a break. And your left brain just kind of goes on autopilot. How many times have you driven to work and not remembered any or most of the trip? Your left brain went on autopilot, your right brain took over. We have to give ourselves permission to let that right brain talk. So the best way to do it is, well, first of all, exercise. I'm not a good example of that, but I do know that I'm supposed to. But another way is, I'm going to challenge every person watching this right now. Here's your challenge. When you leave, wherever you are today, don't turn the radio on or your iPhone or iPad on in the car. Give yourself silence. And I promise that the 20 minutes or half an hour between where you work and where your house is, you will come up with a good idea because they're already in the right side of your brain. So this need for noise, you've got to turn it off, because when your left brain is constantly occupied, you're not getting the good ideas from the right side of your brain. And that's the calculate, or the communicate side.
So you bring up a point that's been bothering me since last night. So you talked about social media in the Social Media Bible and why it was so important to communicate and why we need to engage and why businesses need to, promote themselves and how to do this now. And now, in one sense, you're saying, turn it off. You're going to be much happier when you say no.
Yeah, and that's not easy. There was another poll, and I don't remember the numbers because the whole thing was so absurd. It's like 97% of people have to take their phones to the bathroom. And the most common cause of iPhone failure is dropping it in the toilet. Honestly, you can't spend 3 minutes in the bathroom away from your technology. That's what I'm talking about. So I set rules, honest to goodness, and it really makes everybody that knows me angry. At 5 o'clock, I take this and I put it in my desk drawer in my office and I go downstairs. If you're trying to call me, if the house is on fire, if my kids are calling me, call the wife. I don't care. I will not do telephone, text messaging, social media after 5 o'clock on a weekday. I'm not going to do it. I will not check my emails after noon on Saturday. That's my time to myself. And I will not check any emails in the evening. So yeah, it's difficult, but you know what? I allow myself these times where I do what I'm comfortable doing. I decompress, I watch a lot of Discovery Channel and science stuff, but my brain is still kind of going, and that's where the ideas start coming to me. Because if I focus on, good, it's broke now, so I don't have to worry about it. But if I focus on having that phone with me 24/7, I'm never going to be able to be creative.
Well, let's do a little exercise with those people who are in our group right now. So I want to ask them all to take this exercise and answer, if they can, are you more like a square or a circle? And I'd like you to write it down and put it in the chat and then say why, okay? So what we're gonna just kind of think, it's a little workshop, a little exercise in the reasons that you're justifying why you're more like one over the other, okay? So for those of you who are on this live, square or circle, and then indicate why. And let's do this live so we can get some interaction. If you don't have access to your device, you can say this. We'll give you we'll unmute you. So raise your hand and we'll unmute you if you can't type in right now. There we go. Okay, we're going to unmute you, Wayne. What are you, Wayne?
I'd probably say a circle because I think a square has sharp edges.
That's good.
Okay, thanks for that, Wayne. Appreciate it. We've got Sherry saying she's definitely a circle because she's always outside the box.
I like it.
Cheryl, any comments on your end? She's saying that she's sorry she joined us a little bit late. I think I'm a circle because I like rounded things. I think of waves. I like the ocean. I think I'm a wavy kind of person.
Nice.
So I try to be go with the flow kind of person rather than the square. Although I'm sure that being in the box is also good. Sherry is definitely a circle. We've got Wayne who's a circle. Who's a square? Anybody? Lon, what are you?
Well, you knew you were going to get an out-of-the-box innovative answer. Okay, first of all, I am a square. There's no doubt about it. Because I'm in the box, because I'm looking around all the corners for what's going on in there. Plus, I have to define the box so that I know how the heck to get out of it. Okay, but I'm also kind of a circle because, yeah, I like to have soft edges, and I like to be infinite, like a circle is. But then again, I'm actually kind of both. But a circle doesn't go well with a square. However, actually, it does go perfectly. So I'm both.
Now I get the visuals. That's great. Okay, I want to talk about the garden hose. Okay, so solving problems is about identifying the problem and looking for simple ways to overcome the cause. So think of a problem that you might have, like a simple thing like a garden hose. And how did you look at it differently? And then how did you communicate that to us in the book about innovation?
Yeah, in the book, what I try to do is put a whole bunch, and I think I put like 20 different household examples, just to show you that they don't have to be, the next iPhone. They can be really kind of simple solutions. And one of the things that always really ticks me off is garden hoses. Because as soon as you put them up on the hose carrier, they kink and twist and they snarl and they knock things over. It just really infuriates me. So this one day I was like, okay, why don't I just kind of, doctor, fix thyself. Use your own innovation to try to solve it. Now, some problems may not have a solution, but most of the time we just don't see them. So I'm looking at this garden hose wrapped around a thing, and I took it off and was like, oh gosh, now I get it. The reason that the garden hose kinks is because of you. You twist it and put the kinks in it because you want to make it look pretty as you put it on the holder.
Guilty.
We all do it, and that's what I've done my entire life. So I says, okay, time out. If I'm the one that's causing it, I should be able to one that could put the hose away without creating the problem. So I took the hose out, and I took every one of the kinks out of it, and then here's what I did. I just went back to the carrier, the hose holder, and I just looped it from side to side and just kind of laid it over the top. Now, it didn't look as pretty as a nice round circle, but you know what? When I pulled it off, there were no twists. Same thing with extension cords. If you do that with an extension cord, you're never going to untangle it because every time you do that, you're putting a twist in it. So don't do that. So once I stopped coiling the garden hose and just draped it from side to side, my hose has never kinked up once in 15 years.
Wow, that is so good. I'm going to do that because I just did that with the extension cord yesterday. So now I'm learning. Okay, so now let's get into some more technology innovations for today. I want to talk about some things that are really, really cool. We've got a few minutes to go. We can take questions if we've got them, but something about massive simultaneous online social communities has been of interest to me. So these are things for playing games like HQ Trivia. So we've got millions of strangers playing games together. They call them MSOCs. So you could say this is a trend. You could say this is a fad. What do you think, Lon, having seen the social media evolution? Do you think these massive simultaneous online social communities for playing games, do you think these are going to be around for long, or do you think this is something that's just kind of a in and out?
You know, I believe it's going to be around forever because in one form or another, it has been around forever. It's a basic social need that we all have. Subconsciously and built into us, into our DNA, we have a need to connect with other people. We are herd mentality type people, not always in a bad way, but we need to be with people like ourselves, people that we have something in common with. We need to feel that safety and that inclusion of being with like-minded people. And that's what social media, that was one of the earliest definitions of what social media was, because it comes from the definition of marketing, where we would find a marketing watering hole, we called it, where like-minded people got together. In the older days, it was magazines or television channels or radio channels, but then it became like-minded people on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn. That's why we created groups. And then we had all of this massive online game playing, and it's that huge set of acronym characters that basically was first-person shooter, like Halo 3, Halo 4, World of Warcraft. These people, those platforms had 16, 17, 18 million people operating on them, and they still are absolutely huge because like-minded people got together to solve or to commune over usually a challenge. And that's what we like subconsciously. So seeing these new types of spontaneous, massive congregations of people really is just another form of what we've seen since humans have been around.
Wow, good answer. Thank you for that. I want to also talk about 3D printing. So you've been printing these planes, okay? So were you one of the innovators in 3D printing because of this? And where do you see 3D printing headed? I mean, what can't you print on a 3D printer, really?
Really, it's really amazing. Back in 1999, and again, looking back on an innovation, it's difficult to put it in context. I mean, 1999, email was only just invented, and the internet was only just catching on. And I had come up with this idea, what if we could take a three-dimensional object and just send it over the internet through a PDF? And I built this company where you can actually send 3 pages and build it into an 11-inch wingspan Boeing 737 that said United on it, or a Silverado pickup truck, or the California San Diego Mission Basilica de Alcala for school projects. And it took off. That's just ordinary paper, ordinary printer, everything that we have in our home nowadays. It's called Paper Models Online. That's what I told you. We had about 50,000 customers and $1 million in revenue. Geez, not too shabby for paper. And I got 3 patents on it. So then, about 10 years ago, we started to see this 3D printing. In the early days, it was very small, very slow, very simplistic shapes, platonic shapes, nothing really complicated. But those printers now are dropping in prices. You can find them between $150, $250 and really make some really amazingly complex items. So 3D printing, no doubt about it. I mean, they're even now using it for the space station where they could actually print spare parts. That's amazing. So we're seeing a lot of different things, uses for it right now. Of course, plastic, was the first use, but they're now doing it with metals and ceramics and all different kinds of materials so that these printers are printing your photograph on the top of a cake. They're printing human organs using stem cells 3-dimensionally over a lattice. What the heck is that? And I've seen them scaled up to the point where people literally are 3D printing concrete houses. Can you imagine?
So the supply chain will ultimately shift.
It could. Now, you still can't get an iPhone because you might be able to get a replacement case for an iPhone. You can print your own plastic case. You could do that now. But you're not going to get anything that has multiple types of products in it. I mean, this has the glass cover and the plastic front, the battery in the back. So things where you got lots of different types of components, that's still a ways off. But a single component item, something like this glass, oh, no question about it. I mean, you could probably print this glass right now, that thermal glass. So yeah, and they're getting bigger and they're getting more sophisticated. I mean, they're even using them for jaw replacements and bone replacements, skull replacements.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing stuff. And that's going to be definitely over the next 10 or 15 years, something to keep an eye on, because one day, just like we have a printer in every home and every office, we will have a 3D printer.
Boy, this is just amazing talking to you and listening to you. Thank you so much. I have a question about elder care and technology for the older people, things like alarms, things like pills. What types of technologies do you see maybe for elder care or handicap, since you have a strong interest in that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing more and more of that. I mean, it only took me 10 years to convince my wife to get a Gmail account. Even though I'm like Mr. Technology Guru, she fights technology, but she's actually really good at it now. So as we get older, the younger generations who have been raised on technology, who have embraced technology their entire lives, making the sale is going to be very easy because it's just going to be an extension of what they currently use. But for the baby boom generation, we're going to see a lot more technology helping us. I mean, we're seeing things like right now, I can go for a blood test at 10 o'clock in the morning, and by 2 in the afternoon, it's already posted online for the doctor and for me to review. I mean, there's that kind of technology. But then you have the other actual physical technology, like bone replacement, hip replacement, and medication alarms. And I mean, all I have to do, I'm going to regret this, but here it goes. All I have to do is tell Alexa, there she goes, to set an alarm for 3 o'clock, and she will. So that technology is in our homes already. Now, here's something that I saw. You'll see it in the book if you haven't already seen it. Every once in a while, I remember the future, and here's what I saw. It's a watch. It looks like an iWatch. It looks like an Apple Watch, except it has these like little electrodes on the underside of it, and about every 4 hours, it just measures the sweat on your skin, and it will tell you whether or not you need your diabetes medicine, whether or not any one of your medicines are running low or your body is becoming unbalanced. And there's going to be actually a small pico size injection that will actually shoot it into the surface of your skin, just along the surface. It's kind of like when you put on salves and stuff that actually go in, but it will come out of the back of the watch. And you'll get a prescription, and you'll be able to put these capsules inside your watch. And every 4 hours, it'll test you, and it's not like you take a pill in the morning where you get the big spike and then the dip the rest of the day. This will keep you perfectly running with whatever medications you need throughout the day on a 4-hour basis.
Wow, that's going to be innovative and very, very wonderful.
Now, that's not here yet. That's something that I saw.
Yeah. So can you hold up your book? We've had somebody ask to show that new book and on camera so they can take a picture of it and share it on their social media page.
Yeah, thank you for that. Got it?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
So
300 pages. And that book was 20 years in the works, literally. When I decided to back off a little bit on social media and digital marketing and go back into innovation, which I had actually spoke on from 2000 to about 2005, I found the cover of the book accidentally when I typed in innovative thinking. And the cover of the book said, "Coming soon." And it was a cover that I had previously designed. And when I looked at it, it was 2005. So the word "coming soon" is relative. So I started with all the research I had done up to that point and then caught the research up to 2017. That's why the book ended up being 300 pages.
wow. So what do you want to talk about, Lon? Where do you want to take this conversation next? Tell me, what haven't we asked you about?
Oh my gosh, you did your homework better than anybody who I think has ever interviewed me. It's amazing. Thank you. I don't know. What should we talk about? Innovation is the thing that I'm talking about now because I'm passionate about it, because it's what we need. If you look at the word innovation and you look at the United States, we are a community of innovators, and we always have, going all the way back to the Declaration of Independence. The people that came to the United States were the bravest people on earth, because the people that were cowards, that were afraid, that didn't want to suffer, coming up, spending an entire month in the bottom of a ship and then coming to a new world and trying to scratch out a living, whether it's a pilgrim or whether it was the Great Migration in the late 1800s through Ellis Island. The people that are in America are the bravest, the smartest, and the strongest, because they were the only ones willing not to stay comfortable in their homelands, but they were willing to risk their lives to come to this country. And because that was a question I asked myself about 10 years ago, was why is America the greatest innovator on earth? And we are. We always have been. If you look at the lexicon of words that the world uses, they're all, especially in technology, they're all words that we invented to match the technologies. So the point is that innovation is what sets us aside from the rest of the world. And every once in a while, I think we forget that. And I think we don't put enough emphasis. Certainly companies, big companies, don't put enough emphasis on innovation. And the reason is they want conformity also. They don't want an employee telling them what to do or how to do it different or how to do it better. They want them to do what they're told. So Tom Peters, for example, back in the mid-'80s, remember? He did In Search of Excellence. Yeah, you got it. Yeah, thank you for remembering that. Yeah, he looked at all of the top companies in the world. At the time, it was Sears, 3M, McDonald's, and he wanted to know why they were the greatest companies in the world. And it came down to one single thing. They encouraged innovation. So I think we need to get back to that. I think we need to put more of an emphasis as schools. I mean, the kind of stuff that you're doing. Mention your entrepreneurial center. Well,
in 2010, I created this specialization for the MBA, which was called Mobile Marketing and Social Media. And we teach online globally. Anybody can join. It's a master's degree program with real world professors teaching. And it's 1 month at a time. And so we're looking forward to having another cohort of that starting in March this year. And we want to continue dreaming in the meantime. So make sure that we have our big dreams and we keep them front and center. And Lon, it's been such a pleasure to have you as our guest on this webinar today. I want people to know that they can email you, lon@lonsafko.com, and find your books on Amazon and other places where books are sold, or Kindle.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Lon, for being here, and thank you to those who participated. We really appreciate it. We'll be looking for that poll. We see the results here. People are inventors, entrepreneurs, and innovators, and some are all of the above. So we'll keep that poll going.
Keep doing it.
Be posting this on our social channels as well in the future. Thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. Our next event will be January 29th, featuring Jamie Turner. Jamie Turner is with 60 Second Marketer, and he's going to talk about innovation in 2018. I hope you all can join us then.